For my first video of 2025, I thought it would be good to revisit something that I tackled a few years ago, VOSTROYANs. In that video, I showed you how to build some plastic VOSTROYANs using the Le Grognard from Wargames Atlantic and a few Warhammer parts. I've always had a soft spot for the VOSTROYANs though, and wanted to see if I could build some quote-unquote official tournament legal firstborn, and what better way to try out some of the new Krieg miniatures than by using them to build a VOSTROYAN kill team. Now, the biggest factor in building any VOSTROYANs is to recreate their iconic bearskin. I started out with one of the helmeted heads from the Navy Breaches kit. These are a pretty good approximation to the VOSTROYAN mask heads, but the Solar Auxilia or the Tempestus Sign heads are good options too. After clipping away and smoothing out the crest from the top, I then set about mixing up a small batch of green stuff. This was rolled into a blob and placed on top of the head and allowed to cure. This would form the basic structure of the bearskin and needed to be ever so slightly shorter than what you want the final bearskin to be. By adding this lump, I made it much easier to sculpt on the fur texture later on. After the blob had cured, I mixed up a fresh batch of putty, created a small roll and wrapped it around the lump and the top of the helmet itself. I then smoothed it out, leaving me with a good surface in which to apply my fur texture. A simple way of applying fur texture is to first press in a series of vertical lines around the edge of the hat and a series of spokes across the top using a sharp blade. Remember to use a little bit of Vaseline to prevent the putty from sticking. From here, you can take your hard-tipped sculpting tool and scour in the individual strands of fur by dragging the edges diagonally between the vertical indentations. Gently push these around so they overlap in order to create that tufted effect. If you're unsure about this process, then I'd recommend trying it out on a flat piece of plastic or similar surface until you're comfortable working with the putty to create those small strands. Once you're done, simply leave the putty to cure fully. But first, let's hear from the sponsors of this video, Boot.dev. It's January, which for many of us means finally getting around to those self-improvements you've been promising to do for a long time. One of those pursuits may be to learn how to code, but whether you're just looking to try something new or to take those first steps towards a new career path, learning something new can be tricky. But the folks at Boot.dev believe they have solved this problem by making sure you are never bored. Boot.dev is an online self-paced learning platform where you'll master back-end web development from start to finish using Python and Go. And the best part, it is designed to feel like you're playing an RPG game. Boot.dev gets you actually writing code yourself. As you work through the lessons, you'll rack up XP, climb levels, earn achievements, and complete quests. All the while, you unlock pages in your spellbook, which is full of links and notes that you can review at any time. And if you're ever really stuck on something, don't worry, help is always at hand. Connect with the Boot.dev Discord community or even get assistance from Boots the Bear Wizard. Boots is an AI trained on each lesson and will guide you in the right direction with a series of helpful questions. If you're still scratching your head, you can check out the full solution. Not sure if Boot.dev is for you? No problem. There is a 30-day, no questions asked refund policy, and you can try some of the early challenges in guest mode, completely free. You'll also have access to their videos and text guides to get a feel for how it all works. But if you're ready to dive in, click the link in the description and use my code PeteTheWargamer for 25% off your first payment. That's 25% off your first month or your first year, depending on the subscription you choose. So whether you're looking to try something new or take those first few steps towards a new career path, Boot.dev has you covered. After completing my first bearskin head, I could set to work on the rest of the body. For these, I settled on the new engineers from the Krieg Army box that Games Workshop very kindly sent me. While not an exact match to the classic VOSTROYAN models, they're probably the closest match in plastic across the whole Games Workshop range. In order to match up the ball joint of the breacher head with the flat neck of the Krieg Mini, I needed to do some extensive adjustment to both sides. This saw me removing the bulk of the breecher's neck while simultaneously trimming back the neck from the collar of the Kriegsman. This was a slow process and involved a lot of back and forth comparisons, but once I was happy with the fit, I glued it into place. With this kill team, I followed the Krieg kill team rules and decided to assign my first member as a gunner armed with a Melta gun. The engineer kit only came with a flamer special weapon, so I did need to dip into the regular Krieg guardsman kit for the Melta gun. After attaching the arms, I followed this up with a flamer canister from the engineer kit, along with a backpack and pouches. To add a little extra VOSTROYAN themed detail to this gunner, I dipped into my Dead Animal Bits kit and clipped off a few of the feathers. If you look at the original miniatures or some of the artwork, feathers are often seen attached to the VOSTROYAN's bearskins, so I did the same with the help of a dab of superglue. This was followed with a rather ornate looking dagger sourced from the Tempestus Science kit. The second member of the team was another gunner, and for this I wanted a non-bearskin wearing head. VOSTROYANs are known for their extravagant facial hair, and so I settled on this head taken from the Cities of Sigmar Fusil Major kit. Like with the Breacher head, this did require a good amount of adjustment in order to get it to fit onto an engineered torso, but after a few adjustments I glued the head into place before assembling the torso. For this gunner, I decided to arm him with a grenade launcher and backpack taken from the Krieg kit. To help build upon this grenadier role, I followed these up with a couple of grenade belts from both the Cadian and Krieg kit, along with another small ammo pouch. The third and final gunner would be armed with a plasma gun, so it made sense to me to equip him with a full face helm. For this, I simply recreated the same steps that I performed on the Melta gunner. I did, however, encounter a problem when it came to equipping this VOSTROYAN with a plasma gun. The Krieg kit only comes with a right arm that fits both the Melta and plasma gun, but only one of them. I had already used this on the Melta, so I had to get a little creative. My solution to this was to combine a Krieg las rifle with the plasma gun by cutting away the las gun stock and the regular pistol grip from the plasma gun. After trimming both of these to ensure a snug fit, I glued the two together and sourced a left las rifle arm that allowed me to attach the plasma gun to the engineer's torso. With the plasma gun problem solved, I added a Cadian pistol holster, a Krieg pack, and another Tempestus cyan dagger. With the gunners complete, I moved on to building my team spotter. I used another engineer torso for this, but I first needed to remove the plank that the left foot rested upon. I intended to have my VOSTROYANs in a ruined city, so the trench plank didn't make much sense. So after clipping away the wood and cleaning up the cut, I could assemble the rest of the torso. For the head, I used another bearskin adorned breacher head and made all the necessary adjustments before attaching it to the torso. To create my spotter, I wanted something a little more techy than the original Krieg model armed with a flare gun. This would reflect the closer ties to the Adeptus Mechanicus that the regiment has. Fortunately, the remote control for the remote mine was perfect for this, and was assembled as per the instructions. However, instead of attaching the right arm, I instead added a regular Krieg arm with some binoculars that were sourced from the artillery team, also found in the new Krieg army set. With the main build of the spotter complete, I could attach a regular Krieg pack alongside a las rifle. With my final engineer body, I decided to build a veteran. As per the kill team's rules, this particular operative is equipped with a bionic arm, which provided the perfect excuse to try and recreate this guy from a piece of VOSTROYAN artwork. To create the appearance of a heavily augmented VOSTROYAN, I began with a Tech Thrall head from the Horus Heresy range. Naturally, this had to be heavily clipped down and adjusted in order to fit against the Kriegsman's neck. For the bionic arm, I opted to use an arm that I sourced from the Sicarian kit. It was slightly bigger than a regular human arm, but I felt that this just helped to emphasize the bionic aspect more than an appropriate scaled one. With the Sicarian arm attached to the right shoulder, I could attach a one-handed las rifle arm to the left. The bionic veteran was then finished off with a Krieg pack and some pouches. Next, I focused on the Watchmaster, the leader of the kill team. Naturally, he would need the most impressive facial hair, and so I sourced an appropriate head from the Bretonnian Foot Knight kit. After some considerable clipping and trimming, I was able to sculpt on the bearskin using the same steps that I'd used previously. With the 5 Krieg engineer torsos used up, I then switched to the regular Krieg infantry to make up the rest of the squad. The neck joint was the same as the engineers though, so I still needed to make those adjustments to the neck in order to get the head to fit. When it came to the arms, I dipped back into the engineer kit and grabbed a bolt pistol and power sword wielding pair. For the Watchmaster's final details, I attached more feathers from my Dead Animal Bits kit to the bearskin, along with a rack of medals to help denote the Watchmaster's stature in the squad, and finally finished off the leader with a Space Marine Purity Seal, backpack, and some pouches. For my comm specialist, I used the original VOSTROYAN command squad Vox-Operator as inspiration. While I wouldn't be recreating the chainmail, I did want to match the pose and hood aspect. I achieved this by using a Cadian command squad Vox-Operator head. Naturally, this needed extensive adjustment before it could be glued to a Krieg torso, but what complicated this process further was the requirement to also attach the matching arm. But, like always, the trick here was to just take my time, make small adjustments and frequent comparisons. Eventually, I was able to get both the head and left arm lining up with each other in a realistic manner. The right arm was much more straightforward, and I simply used this one-handed rifle arm. Before I attached the Krieg radio pack, I first removed the tab from the side and replaced it with a pouch. Normally, a last rifle would be mounted here, but this made little sense considering he was already carrying his rifle. The comm specialist was then finished off with a few more pouches. Next up was the Confidant. These are the squad's second in command, and so to reflect this, I wanted a head with facial hair, but not something quite as impressive as the Watchmaster's. So I sourced this particular head from the Navy Breacher kit and added a bearskin in the same way as the rest of the squad. With the bearskin in place, the neck of both the head and torso were trimmed and adjusted until it could be glued into place. For the weapons, I selected the bolt pistol and chainsword from the Krieg kit. Before attaching a regular Krieg pack, along with a satchel that the instructions tell you to attach to the comm specialist. Finally, I just had a few extra details to add in the form of another feather, a Purity Seal, and some more pouches. When it came to building the medic, I wanted to match this particular piece of artwork as closely as possible. This led me to using one of the female Navy Breacher heads, which I then set about sculpting a bearskin onto. To match the artwork as closely as possible, I selected the kneeling torso from the Krieg kit and made the appropriate adjustments to the neck to allow me to attach the head. Fortunately, the medic arms that come with the Krieg kit are perfect for matching the artwork, and so they were attached with me needing to make no further changes. Following this, the medic pack was glued to the back along with a rifle. I then finished off the medic with another component taken from the Cadian command frame. My final kill team member was the sniper, and for this I took inspiration from the goggled head of the original VOSTROYAN sniper set. I found a pretty close approximation in the Exaction squad kit. This time around I opted to skip the bearskin and attach the head directly to the torso. Following this, the normal Krieg sniper arms were attached without any changes. As another nod to the original sniper models, I decided to arm my sniper with a saber, which I sourced from the new Death Rider kit. My plan was to attach this to a regular Krieg pack, but I first had to shave the right hand side down before I could get a good fit. I then finished off my final kill team member with a grenade pouch and one of the techie parts taken from the Space Marine Intercessor kit. With each of my 10 kill team members built, I next needed some bases to attach them to. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to reference the VOSTROYAN's effectiveness of fighting in urban environments and give the base the appearance of a ruined city. I achieved this by first attaching some pieces of torn up cork floor tile. Around this, I then laid down a thick layer of texture paste, and whilst it was still wet, I pressed in some milliput bricks that I'd made earlier. Whenever I have leftover milliput, I roll it out flat, cut it into brick shapes, and then keep them handy for any future builds. After building one base, the process was then repeated 9 more times, and the VOSTROYANs were superglued to each one. When it came to painting, my original plan was to hit everything with a primer coat of trench brown from the Colour Forge. However, the weather had other ideas and using a rattle can primer wasn't possible. So I fell back onto my airbrush and gave the whole squad a base coat of black primer. To recreate the trench brown primer colour, I used some Dust Bowl from the Tooth and Coats range through my airbrush to hit the VOSTROYANs from a high angle. This helped to retain the black primer in the recesses whilst providing a lighter brown starting colour in which to apply my later layers of paint. After the primer, my first task was to paint the iconic red coats of the VOSTROYANs. For these, I used some slightly thin Sanguine Scarlet and applied a couple of thin layers to achieve that good, strong colour. While applying this, I focused most of my attention to the upper edges. I was looking for a slightly more straightforward scheme with this squad, so I didn't worry too much about perfect coverage. With the base coat in place, the red areas were then given a highlight of demon red along the edges. Like before, I focused mainly on the upper and more prominent edges, rather than worrying about the deeper, harder to see points. In addition to the red, another easily recognizable part of the VOSTROYAN color scheme was their brass-colored armor. This was recreated with some Heirloom Gold, as was used to tackle all the armor, as well as parts of the weaponry and other decorative details. Continuing with the metallics, I next used some Surcoat Silver to tackle all of the remaining steel details. Once I'd finished the step, I changed out my paint water before tackling the non-metallics. Next, I used some Death Reaper to tackle a number of different materials. These included the boots, gloves, a couple of the bearskins, the bedrolls, and a few other small details. Because I had applied the Dust Bowl primer, the brown parts of the models didn't need to be base coated, so I just gave them a highlight of Wasteland Brown. These areas included the webbing, the packs, and the brown fabric of the trousers. In a similar fashion to the previous step, I then gave the putties around the lower legs a highlight of Sandstone. I also used this over the Purity Seals and the two bearskins. While I was trying to keep the scheme quite straightforward, I always find that putting that extra little work into the faces can have a massive effect on the overall quality. So I started out with a base coat of Barbarian Brawn, followed by an initial highlight of Dwarven Skin, and finally some small spots of Elven Skin over the most prominent facial features. To paint some of the facial hair and the feathers, I started out with a base coat of Wizard Grey, before I highlighted them with some Carcharadon Grey. Next, I focused on all the lenses, screens, Purity Seals, and the medal ribbons of the Watchmaster. These were all painted with some Witching Hour blue, and then highlighted with some Celestial blue, completing the models themselves, which meant I could focus on the bases. Again, I kept things simple with just a dry brush of Wizard Grey across the rubble. Combined with the black primer and Dust Bowl, this created that perfect broken rubble effect. But I wasn't done just yet. I wanted to give the model a little more grime and shading in some of the recesses, but before I could do any of that, I had to protect my paintwork with a layer of gloss varnish. To achieve the shading and grime, I decided to try out some of the Villainy ink range. Starting out with some Goon's Grime, this is an enamel-based ink and so needed to be thinned with some odorless thinners before being able to be applied through my airbrush. As I sprayed the mixture across the entirety of my kill team, I kept the application fairly light. I didn't want to oversaturate them with grime and instead just create a mild level of weathering. With the grime in place, I then switched to some of the greyish green of Decay of Death. I applied this with a regular brush and focused my application around the rubble of the bases. Finally, using a regular brush once again, I applied some of the black Ichor of the Damned directly into some of the deeper recesses. The ink flowed easily into the nooks and crannies, darkening them down to create the appearance of shadows. While the previous applications of the ink had helped to darken down the recesses somewhat, they had also dulled some of the raised edges too. Fortunately, this was quite easy to fix with a glasses cloth dampened with some odorless thinner. As I wiped this across the armor, clothing and equipment of the VOSTROYANs, it lifted away the grime from just those raised points, retaining the darker recesses. You can use cotton buds for this too, but I find the cloth helps to avoid any lint being left behind. The gloss varnish that I'd applied earlier helped with this step, but once I was done, I did hit the entire squad with a final layer of matte varnish in order to seal in the ink and dull down that glossy finish, which left me with this. And here we have my completed VOSTROYAN kill team, based around the Deathcore rules. While my squad is certainly not an exact match to the original VOSTROYANs, I think that the squad, with its bearskins and red coats, is still easily recognizable as Firstborn. It was a fun challenge to try and recreate a few of the classic models using parts from more recent plastic kits. Now, I always enjoy building kill teams. Being a smaller model count game means it's much easier to convert every single model, and with the concept of specialists, it also opens up the conversion options. So, if you have any suggestions for what kill team I shall tackle next, then leave them down in the comments below. Now, as always, if you'd like to recreate any conversions from this video, I'll include links to all the kits and paints used in this video down in the description below, including where you can pick up my Dead Animal Bits kit. But before I go, let me just say a huge thank you to everyone who continues to help keep this channel going. And if you'd like to support me too, you can get early access to ad-free videos, exclusive merchandise, and even your name in the credits. Simply follow my Patreon link below or hit the join button, just like my top Patreon supporters did, who are Nail5, Axel Jonsson, Ben Yaviran, Berserker, Dakota Gaburi, Daniel Dowling, Immaterial Creations, Cornbread, Maciej Savitsky, Matt Brewer, Molly Mork, Mr. Grimm, Nima, Older Than Time, Pale Juice, Palamic, Ryan Little, Sam Sepulveda, Swedsman, Tim, and Warnovice. And my top channel members who are AM, Alex Verne, Dave, Doug H, Guy Bazant, Kutch Kato, Lee Ely, Mark Taylor, Nerdington Paints, Omni Tom, Philip Poya, S.O., Satoran, That One Tech Priest, The City of Cryas, The Sire Acquired, and Whale Tussler. So until next time, thanks for watching, and goodbye.